Good morning, dear students, and welcome to the second part of our chapter, Animal Classification. In our previous class, we studied about the classification of living organisms. We recalled how we had studied classification of microorganisms in the 8th standard, and last year in the 9th standard, we recalled how we classified plants. And this year, as I said, we are moving on to classification of animals. In the previous class, we also discussed about the history of animal classification, which were the different scientists and philosophers who put forward their theories with regards to animal classification. We discussed the benefits of animal classification, why exactly animal classification is required, and we talked about the traditional method of animal classification, where I told you about the differentiation between non-chordates and chordates. So now we move ahead with our chapter, and we will be studying about the conventional system of animal classification, means the new methods of classification of animals. Now, as per this new method of classification, there are certain criteria which are used based on which the new system has been developed. So, what are these different criteria? The first one is called as the grades of organization. The second one, body symmetry. Third one, germ layers. The fourth one, body cavity. And the fifth one, which is body segmentation. So our new system of classification, which is the one which we are following right now, which is the one that the scientists are following right now, is based on these 5 criteria. Okay, students, now if you remember, in the 7th standard you had learned about the different grades of organization. You know that our body is made up of the smallest structure, which is called as cells. A number of cells come together and you have tissues which are formed. A number of tissues come together and you have an organ which is formed. Number of organs work together and you have an organ system which is formed. And finally, all the organ systems work in coordination with each other and you have a working organism, a living organism which is formed. Okay, so this is called as your grades of organization. Your cells, tissues, organs, organ system and the organism, they all are part of this grades of organization. Okay, so we now move on to explaining each of these 5 categories. So first we start with the grades of organization. Under grades of organization, we first look at the cell level of organization. Under this cell level, we have 2 grades. First one, protoplasmic grade organization, and the second one, cellular grade organization. Now, in protoplasmic grade organization, you have animals which are unicellular, that is, they are made up of only a single cell. Okay, but in case of multicellular animals, many cells can be there which can be performing different functions. In unicellular animals, the animal is entirely made up of only one cell. So how can it have different functions? How can different functions be performed by that particular animal? But it happens that single cell is equipped with such mechanism that that single cell itself will perform all the different work which is required by that animal to survive. So such a type of organization is called as a protoplasmic grade organization, and we see this in animals such as amoeba and paramecium. I'm repeating myself. In this unicellular animals, you have all the different types of functions which are performed by that one single cell only. Okay, and the examples are the first two pictures that I have put up in the slide. The first one, amoeba, and the second one, paramecium. Then we look at the second type of organization, which is the cellular grade organization. Now, in case of multicellular animals, if the tissues are not formed, if they are very primitive type of animals, cells are there, but the cells have not formed tissues. In such animals, you have something called as a cellular grade organization. Okay, the cells itself, you have a number of cells which are there, but they do not form tissues. So the cells take the responsibility of doing the different types of works which are required for that animal to survive. So we see this cellular grade organization in animals which belong to the family Porifera. Okay, examples of it you will learn a little later, but as of right now just remember that cellular grade organization is shown in animals which belong to the family or which belong to the kingdom Porifera. Next, we move on to cell tissue grade organization. Now, in this, we see that the animals have cells and the cells come together to form tissues, but organs are not present. Okay, so the different work which is required to be done by the organism for its survival is done by the cells and by the tissues. So this is called as the cell tissue grade organization, wherein the cells and the tissues come together to perform all the functions. And this kind of organization is seen in animals belonging to the class Cnidaria. Okay. The next is tissue organ grade organization. Now over here you have cells, you have tissues, and you have organs which are formed. Organ system is not there. Okay, so the tissues and the organs of the animals come together and perform the different functions for the animal to survive. This type of organization is seen in the animal called as planaria. Okay, so over here we are talking about cell tissue grade organization, which is seen in animals belonging to Cnidaria, and tissue organ grade organization, which is seen in animals which is seen in an animal called as planaria. And now the final type of organization is the organ system grade organization, which is seen in high level organisms like humans, crabs, frogs. Okay, so in this the different organs come together and form the proper organ systems and performs all the functions which are required for the survival of the organism. Okay, now if I have to say, if you are confused about what is the meaning of organ system, if you take the example of the human body, we have respiratory system, we have excretory system, circulatory system, then you have the reproductive system. So all these different systems are working together inside your human body, and that is how you are able to survive properly. Okay, you are living a healthy life. So this type of grade organization is seen in most of the high level organisms like humans, in different types of birds, in crabs, in frogs. So these are organ system grade organization. As I said, different organs are joined together and they form organ systems, and the organ systems work in proper coordination with each other and perform all the functions which are required for the survival of that particular organism. Now we move on to the second part of our criteria for classification, which is body symmetry. Under this we have three sections: asymmetrical symmetry, bilateral symmetry, and radial symmetry. Now under asymmetrical symmetry, we have all those different types of organisms which we will not be able to divide into two equal halves. I hope you remember your chapter of symmetry that we had done in maths in the 6th standard. Okay, you remember there are some alphabets which we cannot divide into equal parts. For example, the letter F, we cannot divide it into equal parts. The letter G, we cannot divide it into any equal parts. So those letters were called as asymmetrical letters. Similarly, we have some animals which we will not be able to divide into equal halves. For example, over here there is a picture of a sponge which has been shown to you. No matter where you try to divide it, we cannot draw any single line passing through this animal which will divide it into two identical halves. So they are called as asymmetrical animals, or they fall under asymmetrical symmetry. The second one is bilateral symmetry. If you remember, in maths we studied the alphabet B, the alphabet A, the alphabet C. Those alphabets, we could draw one single line through those alphabets and we could get two identical parts of that particular alphabet. Similarly, over here I have shown an example of a butterfly. There is a line which is being drawn through the center of the butterfly, and then we can see that that line is dividing the butterfly into two exactly similar halves. So such animals are said to be having bilateral symmetry. The third one, radial symmetry. If you remember your letter O, we could draw infinite number of lines and we could draw it from anywhere, and your letter O, or you can say your number 0, can be divided into equal halves. So similarly over here we have animals like Hydra, which can be divided into equal halves, and you can have different a number of lines which can be drawn through the center of that animal, and it can divide it into different equal halves. So they are animals which are said to be having radial symmetry. The third criteria that we look at is germ layers. Germ layers are of two types, diploblastic and triploblastic. Now first of all, let us understand what is the meaning of this germ layers. Germ layers are special cells which are formed in multicellular organisms, and they are formed during the very initial period of their embryonic development. Means when the organism is in the womb of the mother, that is when these special cells are formed. Okay, and what is the importance of these cells? The importance is that these germ layers are required for the formation of different tissues in that particular organism when it grows up. Okay, so just remember, germ layers are formed in an individual during the very early embryonic development when that organism is inside the womb of the mother. And what is the importance of it? It helps in the formation of different types of tissues. Okay, now these germ layers can be of two types. That is, in some animals only two types of germ layers are formed, which is endoderm and ectoderm. So those animals are called as diploblastic animals. In those animals, I am repeating myself, only two types of germ layers are formed, which is endoderm and ectoderm, and those animals are called as diploblastic animals. Examples are Cnidaria, Hydra, jellyfish, corals. Okay, so all these animals have only two types of germ cells. Then there are other animals apart from Cnidaria. They form three types of germ layers. They are called as triploblastic animals. Okay, the three different types of germ cells which are formed in them are endoderm, mesoderm and ectoderm. Okay, So apart from Cnidaria, all the animals are triploblastic. Now we look at the fourth criteria of classification, which is body cavity. Body cavity is also called as a coelom. Now what is body cavity? Body cavity is a certain space which is present inside an organism. For example, over here I have put up a picture of a human being. In the human being, we have a number of cavities which are present, like the cranial cavity. Inside the cranial cavity, we have our brain which is present. Then we have the vertebral cavity. Inside the vertebral cavity, we have our spinal cord present. We have the thoracic cavity. Inside that, we have the heart, the lungs which are present. Then the abdominal cavity. In the abdominal cavity, we have our stomach, the intestines present. And finally the pelvic cavity, where we have our reproductive systems present. So like this, inside the body of the organism, we have different cavities which are present. So but there are some organisms in which the cavities are not present, and there are some organisms in which there is not an actual cavity present, but it looks like a cavity. Okay, so all the organisms in which the cavity is not present at all, they are called as acoleomate organisms. Okay, the organisms like the humans in which cavities are present, they are called as eucoelomate organisms. And finally, the organisms which do not have a true cavity, it just looks like a cavity but it is not an actual cavity, so those organisms are called as pseudocoelomate organisms. Now we move on to the last part of our criteria for classification, which is body segmentation. Now if you have ever observed an earthworm, a live earthworm, you must have seen that the body of the earthworm is divided into a number of circular segments. Okay, so such organisms usually are belonging to the class of Annelida, and their body is divided into a number of segments, small units called as segments. So here I have put up pictures of two animals. First one is a earthworm and the second one is a clamworm. So if you have a look at these pictures clearly, you can see that the body of the earthworm and the body of the clamworm is divided into a number of small tiny units called as segments. So those animals which are having segments come under the class of Annelida. Okay, so with this we have completed all the different criteria for classification, and if you look at this picture you will understand how each of these criteria have helped us to reach the classification of the particular animal. For example, your porifera, the first one, I'm looking at the first one. If you look at that last part in the purple color, your porifera animals are acoelomate, that is, they do not have a cavity which is present. Their body is asymmetrical, you cannot divide it into equal halves, and they are showing cellular grade body organization. Okay, so this is how we will have to read this particular chart. You start from the extreme right hand side and then you move towards the left hand side. If you look at Cnidaria, the second one, Cnidaria, they are acoelomate, that is, they do not have a body cavity. They show radial symmetry and they have tissue organ, or they have organ system type of grade. The third one, Platyhelminthes, they are acoelomate. They show bilateral symmetry and they may have either tissue organ or organ system grade of organization. The fourth one, Astelminthis, they are pseudocoelomate, that is, they do not have a true cavity, they have a false cavity. They show bilateral symmetry and they have either tissue organ or organ system grade of body organization. The next ones, The 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th. Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, Hemichordata and Chordata. All these have a proper body cavity, that is, all of them are eucoelomate. All of them show bilateral symmetry and they have either tissue organ or a organ system grade of organization, body organization. Okay, so this is how you read this particular chart. So with this, dear students, we come to the end of our today's lecture. From the next lecture onwards, we will be studying each of these phylums. There are 10 phylums that we will be studying. In this chart you see all those 10 names which are given under each other in that purple color boxes. So we will be studying in detail about each of these 10 phylums. Okay, so till we meet again, dear students, stay safe, stay happy. Bye.